When I got to University of St. Thomas 3 years ago, one of my priorities was to meet with Teresa Shimshak because I was interested in building a partnership with an urban school that was interested in raising the standards and thinking about the ways that we could tackle not just the achievement gap, but the opportunity gap. The first time I ever heard about the belief gap was from Therese. And I can tell you she's an innovator, a big thinker, and we were kindred spirits in really tying together a vision of St. Peter Claver as the pipeline for the future, not just of these young people, but this community. Because ultimately what we're involved in is the formation, not just of what happens in terms of their educational experience, but what we build in terms of our community. We are building the future of St. Paul. We're building the future of the Twin Cities. And these young people are going to be at the forefront of that. I say that because at St. Peter Claver, they don't just produce graduates, they produce either giants or jets. And I want to be clear what I mean by that. Giants grow and jets soar. But in both cases, you either need space or you need a launch pad. I like to think of St. Peter Claver as a launch pad. Because there, those students develop those critical skills. They have access to teachers that are deeply invested in their future. They have spiritual formation. They have a principal who is thinking outside the box in terms of building, and you saw it on display here today. Not just historical knowledge, but historical knowledge that's tied to the arts. And trust me, you don't want to see these kids in a science lab because it's dangerous. You don't want to see what they're doing with math because it's dangerous. And they're doing it in partnership with the University of St. Thomas because we recognize that it's not STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, it's STEAM. Because if the arts aren't there, they're not going to be able to apply it in a way that elevates their community, that ties them in some significant way to the past. And it's part of the ancestor connection that's central to the mission and identity of St. Peter Claver. I say that to you too because I think one of the great things that we've been able to do is talk seriously in terms of growing giants and getting these young people to recognize that in talking about this history that you heard tonight, that we have to stop telling young people that they stand on the shoulders of giants. We have to start telling young people they are the giants. We have to train them to think like giants. We have to train them to be comfortable stepping out in a community and taking on a leadership role very early on. What you see baked into the essence of St. Peter Claver is not just a quality education. What you see is leadership training. What you see is formation. What you see is community development. What you see is true educational innovation. When Therese and I sat down, one of the first things that Therese said is that I'm not interested in building any partnership that's transactional. It's got to be longitudinal. It has to be deep. I said, I think I love you. And from that point forward, I became an assistant principal at St. Peter Claver, and Therese became my associate dean at the University of St. Thomas. St. Thomas is an extension of St. Peter Claver. That is our campus, and when those students come to our campus, we want them to feel like they own it. Because ultimately, we want them to see a seamless movement from St. Peter Claver to St. Thomas, but I want to be very clear here, and then back into this community, to reclaim this community in a way that affirms their identity, its culture, and what we can do together when we're invested in the formation of strong minds and strong bodies that ultimately, and I think we can't read faith out of this, because they have this strong moral background, this strong moral fiber, believe that the only way to elevate a community is to begin to love one another and appreciate that human connection, that connectivity. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was famous for saying in his final book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? That they made a pretty significant error in the way that they pursued civil rights, because he wrote, we focus so narrowly on access and opportunity, we forgot one singular truth. What good is it to have the right to eat in a restaurant if you can't afford anything on the menu? What good is it to have the right to go to college or university or to school if you can't afford the tuition? St. Peter Claver, in partnership with all of you, have eradicated one of the major gaps, one of the major barriers to educational equality, and that's being able to afford the fine education that they receive in that space. And for that, we're deeply grateful. But there's significant work that remains to be done. Teresa and I have started that. Reimagining what K through 12 education looks like so that once those students reach 8th grade, they're already thinking about what you heard tonight, being college bound and what exists beyond that. Understanding that the careers that they prepared for yesterday are not the careers that are going to be necessary in the future. Robot proofing these young people so they understand that, and this is central to Catholic intellectual tradition and to Catholic schools, It's always been about the humanistic enterprise, human connectivity that drives us. Not just about being a great engineer or a great scientist, but about being a good human being who applies scholarship in a way that elevates human connectivity. I don't have to tell all of you because you've invested in St. Peter Claver, but that's the jewel of that school. It's why they produce giants and jets. Giants grow, jets soar. Tonight, help them soar. Thank you.